Hey everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Singles from the Frontline. This time, Codex Space Marines. We are your hosts, Nicky D. Cannon, the flannel fan and producer extraordinaire, and I'm Seth, the Mad Dog, your competitive correspondent. Nicky D, how you been doing?
Oh, Seth, I am so ready for this preview, for this talk about Space Marines. You know that I love my Space Marines, albeit Blood Angels, so not specifically covered in here. But I think that
But
everybody
you're
loves
going to
Space
find
Marines.
some love in here, don't you worry.
Oh, I know, yeah. But I think just about everybody has a Space Marines army somewhere in their closet, somewhere in their display case.
Even me.
Yeah, see, there you go. So I think everybody's really looking forward to this Codex reveal. There's not it's not like Tyranids where there's a whole lot of new units, but this is definitely going to impact how folks play. We're no longer just playing Gladius Task Force folks. Try to say that 3 times fast. So I'm
Task
ready
Forks.
to jump. Yeah,
that's their close combat weapons. They're task force,
or it's the cooks, the kitchen,
the
kitchen folks,
Space Marine chefs, the
right.
elite wing.
Yeah, yes. All right, so Seth, let's go ahead and jump into this.
The new Space Marines should be going up for pre-order in about 2 weeks from now. So we need to thank Games Workshop. They did give us this in advance so that we can take a look at it and review it for you guys. You can always order through Frontline Gaming using the link here on screen or in the description here. That helps out the show. But of course, we are also able to fulfill all your lovely Space Marine orders. And if you always want to hear more from Nicky D and myself, and of course, Kicker, the sigillite of FLG himself, tune in every Wednesday night here on YouTube, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our live show. And we will continue to bring you that weekly news that you so need in your life from us, your lovely friends here at Frontline Gaming.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so folks, we're going to jump into Codex Space Marine, what's get covered here. If you've watched the Tyranids Codex preview before, you already get a little bit of a sense of what to expect with this review that we're going to cover. And specifically, we're going to hit the highlights. This is our Codex Cliff Notes. So if you want a deep dive, you're probably going to want to check out some other channels that are Frontline Gaming affiliates. And Seth, you want to let the folks know who some of those channels may be?
Tabletop Titans, Play on Tabletop, Grim After Dark, Vanguard Tactics. I don't know. I know eventually Angry Joe will cover it. I don't know if he gets preview copies or not. But if you're looking for more preview content, I can guarantee you those four groups are going to have content out as well at the NDA date along with us. But certainly you will have more content in the content sphere, the newest sphere. Is that what the term is?
The news sphere,
News sphere, yes. As the Codex comes out and everyone gets their hands on it.
Yep. So I recommend that you listen to or check out at least one, if not all of those channels. They all have great reviews of the context, and probably a few of them may even have some battle reports once the Codex goes live.
I will put dollars to donuts that you will see a Vanguard Tactics and a Tabletop Titans battle report on the day of pre-orders while we're putting this out.
Good to know. I'll take those donuts, Seth. That's my preference. But covering Space Marines, so what to expect with Space Marines. So who are Space Marines? Everybody probably knows, but in case you are new to the Warhammer hobby, Space Marines, they are the defenders of the Imperium, the Empire of Man. These guys, they are superhuman, genetically modified, power armor wearing soldiers. So they are meant to be the elite of the elite, except for the Custodes. But they're pretty high up on that totem pole in terms of who really wears the big power armored shoes in protecting humanity from both the Xenos races and from the forces of chaos. There are a number of Space Marine chapters. They're each of them based upon the genetic makeup of their Primarch. Some of them are fortunate to still have their Primarch around. Sorry, Iron Hands fans, and then sorry, obviously, for my Blood Angels brothers and sisters that are out there. But there are 9 Loyalist chapters that do remain for the Space Marines. 6 of them are Codex compliant chapters. 3 of them are unique chapters, which are going to have some of their own structure. Seth, you want to just kind of give us a breakdown of like who are those Codex compliant versus non-Codex compliant?
So the Codex compliant ones would be like Ultramarines, Imperial Fists, Salamanders, Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and White Scars. In the index phase of 10th edition, we also had Dark Angels, Space Wolves, Blood Angels, and I believe Black Templar all also got their own unique rules, but they can also use the rules from the Space Marine detachments. So keep that in mind as we're going through there. As far as we're aware, those non-compliant chapters should still be allowed to use these rules as well, which might be something that you're going to see on the tabletop.
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, with that, we're going to get into our next part and covering what is new for this. So, with the Index Space Marines, we had one single detachment already referenced, the Gladius Task Force.
Mhm.
But, Seth, we've got 6 new ones,
Yep.
correct?
Yeah, and that's a change from Tyranids because Tyranids, the invasion fleet was the one we saw in Index, and then we got 5 new ones for a total of 6. So Space Marines got basically an extra detachment. So they're getting 6 new ones, which fits with them having 6 Codex compliant chapters. You'll see a theme here in a minute.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got that. We've got some rules for new units. There's just a handful that are new units for Codex Space Marines. We'll cover those in a little bit. But then, Seth, the big part that is going to be perhaps the most spicy item to cover
Mhm.
for everybody, the Space Marines faction. If you choose Space Marines, regardless of what
Yep.
detachment you get a rule called Oaths of Moment. In the Index, this allows you to reroll. You pick a unit at the start of the battle round and allows you to reroll hits and wound rolls against that unit for the duration of that battle round. That has changed. You're our competitive correspondent, so let the folks know how it's changed and how is that going to impact games.
You no longer get to reroll to wound. It is just reroll to hit. Reroll to hit is still very
Still
strong. Don't get me
good.
wrong, but no reroll to wound. So that is a big step back for the efficiency of a lot of these guns.
Hmm.
So, kind of with that in mind, as we go through a lot of these detachments with their enhancements and their stratagems, if you get access through one of those for improved wound rolls, like +1 to wound, or re-rolling some wounds, that's a significant boost since you won't be getting that through Oath of Moment anymore.
Yep. I also think it's going to mean that stonks for your lieutenants could also
Yes.
be going up for those lethal hits or any other ways you can get lethal hit sources. So that part there definitely going to be a change for Space Marine players, but this is one where we're going to have to get used to it, folks. And with changes to the detachments, new rules, there's other ways that the army can be boosted up. So that's going to be what's new, but what is missing? The first part I'll cover here real quick, and we hit this in the Tyranids Codex Cliff Notes.
Hmm.
There's no sub factions in the sense of there's no in Tyranids, it was no Hive Fleet Leviathan, no Hive Fleet Kronos. Here for Space Marines, there is no detachment White Scars. However, there is a detachment that if you like White Scars and if you like playing a White Scars narrative or themed army, there's going to be a detachment that you're probably going to want to use.
Yep.
Each of the detachments is basically themed towards one of those 6 Codex compliant chapters. And then we have also one bonus additional one that we'll cover when we get there. So that part there is pretty cool.
Mhm.
The other part that's missing, Seth, firstborn or trueborn Marines. What's that terminology mean, and what's happening to some of those
Yeah.
guys?
So years ago, I think so over 5 years ago now, they introduced the Primaris line of
Hmm.
Space Marines, which, from a modeling standpoint, people will call them true scale, where they're the appropriate. They're supposed to be so much bigger than a regular human, so they made them the appropriate size. GW has always been forward with eventually they will retire some of the older lines, and so a lot of Trueborn units have been retired. Particularly, a lot of the generic characters
Hmm.
have been of the Trueborn variety have been retired. So now we're seeing a lot of the more just the Primaris sculpts. Interestingly enough, a lot of the Primaris names have been removed
Yeah.
as well. So we're seeing kind of a merging of those two lines. They've already gave us a nice long list of models a couple, I think almost a month ago
Month
now,
ago.
that
Yeah.
will no longer be produced. So they're trimming down the Space Marine line. It's about 80 to 90 data sheets now, which is a significant cutback from where they were. That is a good thing for non-Space Marine players because it's easier for us to know what the crap is on the table,
Hmm.
and it is easier for GW to balance a codex with less data sheets. Now, I understand, Space Marine players out there might be sad to see some of those data sheets going, but if you had a Primaris captain and a regular captain and they have the same war gear and they're on the right size base, I don't think anyone's going to care if you use the regular sized captain as the new captain profile. So you'll still be able to play with those models. You just might
Yeah.
have less variety in data sheet abilities.
Yeah. So we knew this was coming based upon, as Seth said, some of the notes on what models would be removed from the range. Having that part, there are some of the unique characters, some
Mhm.
of the special or name characters that are being removed as well as some of the trueborn ones. So one of the ones
Mhm.
that immediately comes to mind, for example, um, Chaplain Cassius. who is an Ultramarines captain.
Look, that
Sorry,
man had been through a
chaplain.
lot. He'd been half eaten by Tyranids and then rebuilt. You know how hard it is to cross the Rubicon Primaris when you've been half eaten by a Tyranid?
Hey, I mean, they say in the lore, like, only 40% make it. So there's going to be some, hey, maybe they don't make it, or maybe they face an end of battle, right? The thing is,
Yep.
as these codexes, right, we're not just looking at a point in time in the 41st millennium. Like, this could be,
Yeah.
a couple hundred years later or something. So there are some characters that are removed. We're not going to go over all of them. And then the other item is that some weapon options have been adjusted or changed. So one example, the Captain and Terminator armor, the weapon options for that Captain and Terminator armor are now only the weapon options that come in the new kit
Yep.
that is available, the multi-part kit. So we know that there is a Captain and Terminator armor model if you got the Leviathan box set, but there is also now a standalone one. So really, in terms of melee weapons, he's just limited down to Power Sword or Power Fist. So it starts to trim down what options you can use just a little bit. But again, you still have some options that
Yep.
are there. So with that, we're going to move ourselves along here. And the first thing that we got, okay, so Seth, we're going to go into detachments. This is what we're going to cover.
Yes.
So for this Codex Cliff Notes, what we're going to do, I'm going to introduce the detachment name real quick, maybe a bullet point or two, and then we're going to kick it over to our competitive correspondent, Seth, to give us some of the tasty treats that you may be seeing and list, or the stratagems that you may be seeing when folks are playing this on the tabletop. So the first one that we're going to cover is the Gladius Task Force. This is what we've already seen from Space Marines. It's intended to really be a flexible, meet your opponent on the
Yep.
battlefield type of detachment. Seth, what can you tell us about this one? Have there really been any changes for it?
Yeah. No new changes on this one. This is basically what we've seen in the index. Importantly, it has a stratagem called Armor of Contempt, which reduces the incoming AP by 1. That stratagem, interestingly, shows up in every detachment. Which is also a change from what we saw with Tyranids. Tyranids,
Yep.
there were no stratagems that were common to all detachments, but Armor of Contempt is a common stratagem for all detachments. So keep that in mind as we move forward. I'm not going to be mentioning it in my combos because everyone has it, but this is basically the detachment of Marines that you have been seeing most folks play throughout the duration of this index phase of 10th edition.
This is supposed to be a task force or a detachment that is really super flexible, able to meet any foe on the battlefield. Really,
or Edgar Allan Poe even.
yeah, yeah. And so really, this is supposed to be kind of your Ultramarines, Codex
Yep.
compliant, can do all the things that Marines are supposed to do, that are going to be trained.
They read
in
the
everything.
book. They're like, "Yes, sir. We read the manual. We're good. We know what we're doing."
In a way, kind of, if they were an X-Men, they'd kind of be the Cyclops, right? Like, they're gonna be the rules
I mean,
follower.
yes, yes, yes. I agree.
All right, let's go to our next detachment. So our first
I want
new
to see you keep
detachment.
this X-Men analogy going the whole time. Good luck.
I might have to. Okay, so our next one here, it's our Anvil Siege Force. This one is really going to focus on essentially siege warfare. So being able to get dug in, kill your enemies at range, but also being able to withhold or withstand that firepower from enemies at range. Seth, what have you got from this one? What
Yeah.
are the
So
enhancements like? What are stratagems
the
like?
big thing is if you have a heavy weapon, or all weapons count as heavy for this detachment. So remembering the core rule, if you sit still, you get +1 to hit, and if you already have heavy and you sit still, you get +1 to wound. That's a very strong rule. Problem being that you have to sit still for it, and they don't
Yeah.
really seem to have much access to things that give them counting as standing still. The things that do stand out to me, there is an enhancement called Architect of War, which is the leader gives his unit ignore cover. Cover is extremely easy to come by in 10th edition, so just ignoring that is a big deal. And then there is a stratagem called Battle Drill Recall. 1 CP, that unit will gain sustained hits 1. And if that unit was able to remain stationary, it gets critical hits on 5s instead of 6s. So just a nice little buff to your damage output there.
Yep. So this is going to be one where, if you know the lore for Space Marines, this is going to be something where it's really kind of focused on long range shooting, being able to, again, siege warfare. Imperial Fist, folks.
Yep.
Especially with the way that the detachment is set up, being able to boost even your kind of weaker weapons. And if they remain stationary, they can, and the weapons have heavy, they're going to get +1 to wound. So even bolters and some of the weaker weapons are going to be able to punch up a little bit better into some of the tougher targets that they face. So again, it's not strictly an Imperial Fist detachment, but if you like Imperial Fist, you may find yourself gravitating towards this detachment that also has enhancements for Gravis armor characters. Next one is going to be, and Seth, I'll say this one I expect to be a little bit popular just because of how it skews. It's the Iron Storm Spearhead. this is really a detachment. The narrative or lore section covers it. This is for those detachments or those Space Marines that really want to be aligned with the blessing of the machine spirit and the
Yeah,
omnissiah.
baby.
So Seth, tell us about this one.
This is all about vehicles. This is the main thing you get is every single unit gets a single reroll hit damage or hit wound or damage each time it activates. So you want big burly units with not a lot of shot count, but really good shots, aka tanks.
Mm-hmm.
The standouts here, there is an enhancement. There's a couple of really good ones, but the one I picked was an enhancement that you give on a tech marine, and that tech marine gives all vehicles within 6 inches lethal hits, remembering that tech marines, while near vehicles, are lone operatives, so they cannot be targeted. So you can I think there's a really fun little combo where you have some impulsors full of hell blasters. Remember, after the impulsor moves, you can disembark. You disembark that tech marine out of the impulsor. He's hanging out with his impulsor friends and his little impulsor bubble saying, all you guys get lethal hits. And you're like, dang, that's pretty good. There's also a 1 CP strat. If you are targeting a unit that is below half strength, you get sustained hits 1. And if the unit that is shooting the below half strength unit, aka your unit, is a vehicle, you get crits on 5s. So you can, and remember, when you're using the firing deck rule, those Hellblasters guns count as being on the impulsor. So I think that's pretty cool. I'm excited for that. I think you're going to see a lot of cool vehicle builds. I really like Space Marine vehicles, particularly the new Primaris line, the Grav line. So I think they look really cool. I have a bunch of them from back in 8th edition days, painted up. So part of me wants to screw around with that painting project again, but part of me remembers how hard those things were to paint.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a detachment that's seen quite a bit, focusing on vehicles, tech marines. We're going to see armies now with multiple Primaris dreadnought type classes, I think, that you can field. So this is, I think, one that we're going to see. And also, Seth, that core rule to this detachment where you can reroll a hit roll, wound roll, or damage roll. With Oath of Moments, no longer rerolling wound rolls. Anytime you can get a reroll wound roll, I think that may be something here where that gets focused on a little bit more. So
and remember, when you have that, say, I don't know, sustained hits on 5s, you could just reroll everything that's on a 5.
Yep. Spike your hit rolls and go from there.
Yep.
All right. Next one, Detachment Firestorm Assault Force. This one kind of interesting, really based more on shock troops, close range combat, so shooting, but still close to the opponent. Has a number of things even as well related to transports, interestingly enough.
Yep.
But tell us about this detachment set.
Yep. So the big buff is if you're using an assault weapon that's within 12 inches of your opponent, you get +1 strength on that weapon. So mostly you're thinking about flamers and torrent weapons. So very strong on that front. Standouts, there is an enhancement forged in battle once per turn. The leader can make the unit he is in turn a hit or a save roll into a 6. The hit, not so exciting, but that guaranteed pass a save when you really need it can be very useful. Now, in the stratagem section, there was some spiciness, but the one I picked was the 2 CP strat Immolation Protocol, which gives all of a unit's torrent weapons dev wounds.
So we know dev wounds got tuned down and that they're no longer mortal wounds, but being able to bypass armor and invulnerable saves, still
particularly
nice.
if you have a large volume of shots, say, I don't know, out of a bunch of flamers.
Yes.
So,
And there are quite a few Space Marine units that have some flamer. This is also a detachment where there are ways that you can increase the strength, the saving power, especially for some of your characters that are there. So this is one where it may not be as closely themed as some of the other detachments, but it picks out a lot of the items that are seen or that would be assumed with a Salamanders chapter. So if you're a Salamanders force, it's got the green and the dragon scale and capes that are there.
I'm looking at one of my Atlanta friends, Max Steele. This is for you, buddy.
All right, so we got that one. The next one, this one, I think, Seth, if there was a movie that was going to be focusing or playing this detachment, it might be Talladega Nights, Ricky, the story of, or the Ballad of Ricky Bobby. What is the Stormlance Task Force all about?
It is about getting in your opponent's face and getting there fast. It is anything in this attachment can advance in charge or fall back in charge. So an extremely mobile, get in your face and punch them hard force. in terms of standouts, there's an enhancement called the Portent of Wisdom, which allows the unit to reroll advance rolls. In and of itself, not super exciting because maybe you roll well in your advance, but it just makes you a bit more reliable. But you combo that with a 1 CP stratagem called Shock Assault, and a mounted unit gets reroll to charge and lance weapons. So now if you have that leader in a unit and you spend 1 CP, you have reroll advance and reroll charge rolls. And when you get in there, you're +1 to wound. Now, Nicky D, you said this fits what group well?
Well, white scars. It's supposed to be right. It's like really works well for mounted. There are also some of the benefits that can also work for units that have fly. So in the lore, white scars are either bikes or speeder focused. But there are some of those non-codex compliant chapters, Seth, that you think this can play well with, right?
I think you're going to see someone cook up a mighty Thunderwolf Cav Space Wolf list, particularly with that Shock Assault and Portent Wisdom combo, where you can reliably get that unit up the field fast and into combat doing damage. I'm excited to see someone come out of the woodwork with that and make that particular combo work. Hunter, I'm looking at you. I'm just going to call out all my Space Marine friends to make them write lists.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, there is a song by Primus called Too Many Puppies, and when it comes to a Space Wolves list, Seth, that is not a thing. Bring as many dogs as you want, folks. Seth, the other chapter that I'll point out that this could also work relatively well for, Ravenwing Dark Angels.
Yes.
Right? A lot of bikes, a lot of speeders. Well. This is one where that also could definitely be in there.
Because they still have access to all their unique speeders, and they have, was it Black Knights is their
Black Knights?
Yep.
So there's some definitely good play here. So Seth, we're going from one detachment that's going to be very fast, very loud, and it's really going to be very, very forward about what it wants to do. We're going to go to the sneaky boys next, the Vanguard Spearhead. This is really a detachment that wants to strike from the shadows and is focused on infantry and Phobos units and enhancements. But tell us more about the specifics for this detachment.
They're in a very unique spot. I like them. If I were to pick up a Space Marine army to play today, I kind of want to try to make this work. Their rule, Strike from the Shadows, gives units that are more than 12 inches away from the enemy stealth and cover. So -1 to hit and light cover. That's pretty good. Now, there's some standouts here. There's an enhancement called Blade Driven Deep that the leader gives the unit he's attached to infiltrate. So in my mind, I'm going to take a leader and I'm going to stick him in some Gravis armor aggressors, and we're going to infiltrate up the field. So now we got some big beefy boys with a lot of guns. Then guns that want to be relatively close to you. Now, the next step of the combo is a 1 CP strat, Strike from the Shadows. If you're targeting something that's more than 12 inches away, which remember you want to be more than 12 away, so that you are getting your stealth and cover, you get +1 to hit and +1 AP on those guns.
That's always good.
Yeah, extra AP, extra hitting. And then you're like, but Seth, I'm real close to the enemy. They're going to come punch me, and I don't want to be punched necessarily. There's a 1 CP stratagem called Calculated Feint, where after you've been targeted by a charge, you get to move D6 inches. Unless you're a Phobos unit, then you just automatically move 6.
Yeah. Now those Phobos units are pretty limited. They're obviously not the Gravis, units that you talked about. But it's a part there where this one I think is really interesting.
Yeah,
it gives you a lot of shenanigans.
If you rephrase that strat, this is basically Tanglefoot grenades from Custodes, and that, as a player that played a lot on Assault Armies in 9th edition, was a nightmare for me when you were like, all right, I have an 8-inch charge. Boop. Oh, nope. Now I rolled a 5. Now it's a 13-inch charge. Good luck making that. And you're like, I guess I can't. And you've already been declared as the target, so...
Yeah, what do you do? Yeah, I really like this detachment. I don't know if I don't think the power of it's not as killy, right, as some of the other.
I expect some of my friends, Bobby Azell, to make this hum. So I'm just gonna keep calling them out.
Do it. Yeah, I think we'll see this one. I find it pretty alluring myself, just because it is one where I think it's gonna be sneaky, and it's gonna be really rewarding that really tactical, specific play. How do you master movement phase? How do you master picking the right targets? To me, that I think is really interesting. I think it's very thematic and flavorful, especially if you want to play Raven Guard. And even the detachment rule, Seth, I'm pretty sure that is almost word for word the Raven Guard bonus that they got in 8th and 9th edition. Pretty close. So this one here, really excited for that. We'll go to our next one, but Seth, we've covered actually 6 detachments that kind of align with the 6 Codex compliant chapters. Our last detachment is one that is really actually just focused on the first company. For
Oh
those of you
yeah.
familiar with Space Marines, first company, those are the veterans. So your Terminators, your Stern Guard, Vanguard vets, Blade
hmm
Guard veterans now for a unit that is truly Primaris. But Seth, tell us about this detachment because I expect it's one that we'll see.
Yep. So the big rule for this detachment is once per game, their oath target they gain reroll wounds against. So
Mhm.
they get once per game reroll wounds.
It's back for
It's
one
back.
detachment.
Yeah, for one detachment in one turn. But if that is the one thing that needs to die right now, I think you will see some people taking advantage of that particular rule. Now, the standouts here, there is a enhancement called Iron Resolve. You give that to a Terminator character. He joins a Terminator unit. The character has a 5-up feel no pain, but once per game he can make the unit have a 5-up feel no pain.
Yeah.
So that turn that you get the clap back, so to speak, and you want to hold, you can hold. I think something like this and maybe Deathwing would be amazing. And there is generally speaking, outside of the Vanguard vets, this is not a terribly mobile set of units, Stern Guard and Terminators. So there is a 1 CP stratagem called Orbital Teleportarium, where you can remove a Terminator unit that's not in engagement range of an enemy unit and put it back into Deep Strike Reserve, and then the next turn come back on the table. So if you have finished cleaning up an area and you got to go somewhere else, you can pick them up and remove them. There's also a stratagem for a sticky objective.
Mm-hmm.
So you have more limited units because you're playing more of an elite army in this build, but you do still have some flexibility with the stratagems to allow you to maybe hold objectives and go somewhere else on the table and keep using those units to their effectiveness.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is one where it's going to be. I mean, folks who have been in the hobby for a long time have plenty of Terminator models. I think we're going to see this, right? There's new Terminator kits with Leviathan and the new set that's coming out, new
Yep.
Stern Guard models as well. So I think this is one where it's going to be. It's also when you have a more elite force like this, Seth. This kind of army fits very well into a small box for the purposes of traveling or flying to events like Las Vegas
Yes.
Open. So
That's
I
fair.
think this is one where we're going to see people really kind of build it as its own, not monster or vehicles kind of stat check army, but an elite infantry stat check type of army. I definitely think we'll be seeing play for this one. But Seth, with that covers us for the detachments. There's just a couple of new units that come in this codex. The captain with jump pack, company heroes, and then assault intercessor with jump pack. There's not a whole lot to cover here, but Seth, do you want to hit some highlights?
The captain and the assault intercessors are very much just like their foot counterparts with the jump pack. The captain giving I think it's +1 to hit to the unit he joins, and the ability to use a stratagem at 0 CP.
+1 strength when they charge.
+1 strength. My fault. Sorry. And the assault intercessors are basically the same stat line except for the 12-inch move. So both of these are just very kind of similar, but gaining that 12-inch movement with fly, which is very useful. Now, the Company of Heroes is a very interesting unit. It is a 4-man unit. It's got a banner in it, which gives the unit +1 OC. It has to have a character attached to the unit, but that unit is -1 to wound while the character is attached to them. And importantly, every dude in that unit is 4 wounds.
Yeah.
So that 4 dudes is actually 16 wounds. So it is a fairly durable little unit with -1 to wound, with 4 wounds apiece. You're still a Marine, so you got a good toughness and save. You got access to Armor of Contempt. So I think you could see if you have a buffing character that you don't necessarily want attached to a unit that is going to be a high value target, you might see them used in this case. So I personally think you might see some use out of it. The points, at least as printed in the Codex, are fairly reliable, but this is a great time to remind folks that the points in both the Tyranids and the Space Marine Codex include a QR code to the latest points published online, as well as the app. The app kind of being the final place to find your updated points. So keep that in mind. We might see some adjustments as things go there.
Right.
So
yeah. Well, Seth, I think that kind of covers us for Codex Space Marines. Again, this is our short review meant to be really a nice quick listen while you're driving to work or while you're going out for a quick run. Kicker is probably listen to this while he's out on a run or something like that. But we're going to give kind of a quick summary and then maybe what we expect that we'll see or and what it's going to look like. But in summary, for Codex Space Marines, again, 7 detachments. These are going to be largely based on powering up a certain type of unit. In the Space Marine Codex or a unit type. They also somewhat align with certain chapter motifs. We do see some streamlining and updates, some updates for datasheets. As Seth just mentioned, points you're going to want to check out the QR code that's in the Codex or update it for the Uniform Field Manual. Or, of course, check out the Games Workshop 40K app. That is going to be the best way to check your points for items.
Mhm.
And then the other key point as it relates to this, the Trueborn or Firstborn Marine, that kind of retirement or combining with
Yeah.
the Primaris line,
I think if
we're
you just
starting to
want to
see it.
paint gold watches on all of their wrists, it's time.
We're getting there. So, Seth, overall thoughts, excitement.
I'm excited. I've got to admit that my plan to play orcs for a year is still in play, but these are definitely one of the armies that I might be toying around with when that year is up.
Yep.
Because they're going to have a bunch of unique builds and a bunch of opportunities for me to try something different. And that's what I like is every one of the attachments does have a very unique flavor, and I still think most of them are viable in some form or another. It'll be interesting to see how folks theory out and craft some lists there. So I think we'll still see a fair amount of variety with Space Marines, which is really what we saw from the Tyranid Codex and now
Yeah.
the Space Marine Codex. So I'm happy with where the design is heading as a whole with these codexes for 10th edition.
Yeah, I'll add the timing of it is perhaps not great, but with so many different with 7 different attachments that play a very different role for what they can
Mhm.
do, this actually gives a lot of flavor as well for team-based tournaments,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Where you're not necessarily going to see, right? Could you build a, Space Marines Anvil Siege Force that maybe is going to work a little bit better on a lighter board, or do you build, if it's a denser board where you have cover, are you going to build that Vanguard Spearhead, right? Like that part I think is really interesting. But we kind of just finished the season of team tournaments here, at
Yep.
least based in the US. I know things internationally are a little bit different. So that part I'll be interested to see how team tournaments, especially use Space Marines Codex.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. All
All right,
right.
Seth, take us out, bud.
Well, we thank you so much for watching this I'm going to try that again. We thank you so much for watching this Signals special report on the new Codex Space Marines. Thank you so much for Games Workshop again for allowing us to take a look at this. If you want a more in-depth review, go check out our affiliates, Tabletop Titans, Play on Tabletop, Vanguard Tactics, Grim After Dark. They're all going to have reviews up. So go check them out. But until next time, this has been Nicky D. Cannon and Seth the Mad Doc, and have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.